It looks like the Reavers are hitting the docks again, Juno said, watching the area through binoculars. Our path to the lower level should be clear. I sat on the edge of the rooftop, overlooking the south end of the city, the rain falling in heavy sheets around me. Water dripped off my nose, but I didn't move, concentrating my attention towards the docks. I didn't have Juno's binoculars, but my contacts let me zoom far enough to see that she was right. A swarm of reavers flew towards the shantytown that lay next to the river, looking like metallic squids arcing through the sky. They flashed with lights, and even though I couldn't see it, I knew they were marked with the lightning logo, Raikage Industries. I sniffed at the air. Well, at least it's raining pretty hard, I said. That might interfere with their sensors. Maybe they'll only manage to grab a few dozen people this time. Juno scoffed. They never grabbed that few. She stuffed her binoculars into her bag and turned her face up towards the rain. Juno was in her late 20s and had been making her living on the wrong side of the law for at least a decade. Her hair was pulled tight into a ponytail, revealing a tattoo on the side of her neck. The tattoo was of angel wings, the symbol that marked her as a courier. She opened her eyes and caught me staring at the tattoo. "You like what you see, kid?" I tore my eyes away and looked back over the city, the neon lights hazy in the rain. "No. Well, yes. I mean," Juno snorted. "Take it easy, Leo. I'm just giving you a hard time. Give it another 6 months with me, and you'll be ready to join the couriers. That's a promise." I shot her a look, raising my eyebrows in surprise. "Really?" I asked. "So soon?" Her serious expression was broken by the barest ghost of a smile. "We'll see." Her face regained its rock-hard discipline. "For now, we have an appointment to keep." I hopped up to my feet and threw my backpack over my shoulder. I was surprised how familiar the weight of it had become. I'd only been training with Juno for a year now, but my past life was little more than a hazy memory, something that happened to someone else. An image rose to my mind of a warm bed and the smell of hot dinner. I pushed it away. Remembering was useless. All those things happened to a different Leo, and he wasn't the same person I was. Not anymore. Those memories didn't even feel real. Not like this. Not like the feeling of pavement beneath my feet and the cold sting of rain down my back. I hurried after Juno, down the stairs that led to the street, pulling up my hood to shield my face. Crowds of people filled the streets, bumping and pushing as they made their way through the chilly night air. Juno led the way, cutting through the crowd like water. I marveled at her. She had mastered the art of moving quickly while remaining unnoticed. I trailed a dozen feet behind her so, doing my best to follow the techniques that she'd taught me. We had made it a few blocks when I heard it. A low buzzing sound coming from above. A reaver dropped into the street ahead of us. It looked like a giant luminescent squid, flashing its lights into the crowd. My stomach dropped, and my instincts screamed at me to look for an alleyway to duck into. But no, I was more experienced than that. I forced the look of annoyance onto my face that Juno had drilled into me. I knew they'd be scanning the crowd for signs of fear. A hologram was projected from the reaver, and Robert Henderson, the CEO of Raikage Industries, appeared. He was sitting in an armchair and had a kind expression on his face. "Hello, citizens of Pittsburgh," he began. "As CEO of Raikage Industries, it has been my privilege to serve the members of this city. We here at Raikage Industries have exciting plans to announce in the near future. Plans that involve everything from police reforms to information about rising electricity costs." Henderson stood up and began to pace, the hologram tracking him as he moved. "But I'd like to respond to a letter that I received from a concerned citizen." He picked up an actual physical letter from a desk, and only my fear and training stopped me from scoffing out loud at the absurdity of it. Juno was nowhere to be seen. Good, I thought. At least we won't both be caught if they process this crowd. Dear Mr. Henderson, he continued with the letter, I am concerned with what your relocation drones are doing to the poor members of society. I've been hearing so much about Raikage's relocation program, and I just hope that we're not doing more harm than good. Sincerely, Deborah. Henderson shot a reassuring grin at the camera. Deborah, thank you for writing. I'd like to assure you that our relocation drones take the utmost care in transporting those more unfortunate members of society. He shrugged. But we must also remember that these people are living in crime, disease, and filth. It is Raikage Industries' responsibility, as caretakers of Pittsburgh, to ensure the safety of all, even if it means the discomfort of the few. This was the third time I'd heard this speech. If the Reaver's facial recognition software had detected enough suspicious activity, it might mean that they'd stop the crowd and process each one of us individually. I held my breath. Henderson clapped his hands and nodded. Great. Just remember, citizens, we are making progress. I sighed. That was the sign that we'd passed. The Reaver lifted up off the ground and flew away, and the crowd began moving again. When I blinked, the back of my eyelid was a dull green, a sign that a message was waiting for me. I flicked my eye to the top right twice, and the message appeared in my right contact lens. Go home. No meeting tonight. That was too close. Jay. I sighed, but sent back a message with one period that meant that I acknowledged the order. I turned left at the next intersection, then left again at the next one, just like Juno had taught me. Nothing says suspicious like just turning around. The city buzzed with activity, even in the rain. Street vendors sold their goods, rich people flew in their cars overhead, and drones swept the street. After 20 minutes or so of walking, I finally reached the industrial district. Factories loomed around, most shuttered and abandoned. The street was nearly empty, except for what I assumed were some drug dealers on a street corner far in front of me. I ducked into an alleyway that cut between two factories, and looked directly into the corner of a specific brick while tapping on another. A soft hiss rang out, and a pile of trash down the alleyway moved as a singular piece, uncovering a manhole. I flipped it up and slid down the ladder that led into the hideaway. I breathed a sigh of relief when the trash slid back over the entrance. Raikage Industries still hadn't ever found a courier hideout since they took over Pittsburgh, though it wasn't for their lack of trying. I walked down a corridor, passing a half-dozen rooms until I reached one that said Leo. I rapped my knuckles on it and finally relaxed when Anna pushed open the door. You made it back! She squealed and jumped up to give me a hug. I was glad to see her smiling again. She hadn't taken our parents' deaths well, and I'd missed that laugh. Hey, Squirt, you learn anything today? I asked, messing up her hair. Don't call me Squirt, Anna said, pouting. Then a grin broke out on her face again. But yes, did you know that whales eat 500,000 calories in a single mouthful? Oh yeah? I asked. Well, maybe we should get a whale to share some of that with us then. Anna pouted at me. Come on, Leo, don't be so down. Things are great. I shook my head and threw my backpack onto the floor of the room. You're right, I said. But it's my job to worry about things now. Anna shrugged and jumped onto her bed, pulling out her new phone and tapping away at some game. Our apartment was small, consisting of 2 rooms, a bedroom with bunk beds and a desk, together with a cramped bathroom. The walls were made of metal, and it was lit up by some white LED lights that we had installed. I walked to the sink and pulled out my contacts one at a time, setting them in their electrical solution to recharge. The world immediately grew less vivid and detailed. Not blurry, just more real. My contacts used information they gathered to tell you stuff that wasn't visible to the naked eye. They also gave me access to communication and information on my surroundings. But after a whole day of being bombarded by the information, I needed a break. Once my contacts were in place in the solution, I pulled out a rag and rubbed at my eyes. trying to clear them of the electro fluid that protected and powered my contacts while in use. Anna was laying on her bottom bunk, her feet waving in the air while staring at her phone. The wall beside her bunk was plastered with stickers of sea creatures. A huge megalodon was stuck on the wall next to her pillow. She was 8 years old. Our parents' accident had been almost a year and a half back, and she finally seemed happy again. I looked around at the apartment we lived in. It was small, sure, but it was comfortable, climate-controlled, and above all, safe from the Reavers. It would be worth millions on the black market, and here the couriers were just letting us stay here at no cost. I sighed and rubbed my forehead. I already knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch. At some point, I'd pay the price. When the time came, I'd become a courier and have to take their contracts. The couriers were the premier black market service provider in Pittsburgh. Running services that competed with Raikage Incorporated was playing a dangerous game. Anna hummed to herself softly as she tapped away at her game. I'd do whatever it took to keep her here, safe. I'd do whatever the couriers wanted. A knock came from the door, and I jumped at the noise. I checked the view screen and saw Juno standing in front of it, dripping wet. I pulled it open and let her in. "Juno," Anna said. "Did you bring me anything?" "Don't I always?" Juno said. She reached into a pocket and pulled out a stuffed animal shark. Anna shrieked in joy and ran at her, giving Juno a hug and taking the toy. Juno's normally stoic expression broke into an actual grin. I stared at it in amazement. She looked over at me and nodded her head back out towards the hall. "Come on, kid. We've got something we need to do." Her eyes caught on mine. "You took out your contacts. They're designed to only need recharging once a week. Why?" I stared at the ground. "They're too much for me sometimes," I said, "and they make me feel like I'm a kid playing the part of a courier. That I should be ready to die at any moment for the cause." I grimaced, knowing how bad that sounded. "But I know that's what I'm working towards. Should I put them back in?" Juno stared at me, nodding to herself. "You should get in the habit of only taking them out for recharge. But I'm not planning on taking us far. It'll be good training for you, in the case that you lose them." "I'll be back in a minute," I said to Anna. Anna nodded and jumped onto her bed, still playing with the shark. Juno and I made our way out of the bunker and into the night. The rain still came down in sheets, but the street was lit up by the flashing advertisements that flew overhead. The night was alive with light and sound, though none of it came from people. We walked through the industrial district, making ourselves as inconspicuous as possible. "We're meeting with an old friend of mine," Juno said. "He's been working inside Raikage Industries for something like 25 years, but he hates them just as much as we do. He requested a meeting with me about an hour ago." Juno led us into an abandoned factory and held the door open for me. I walked inside, feeling the familiar anxiety that always came before a meeting with clients or other couriers. A man stood inside, facing away from the door. He wore a trench coat and stood with a hand behind his back. "Dionysus," Juno said. "It's good to see you again." Dionysus turned around. The left half of his face was composed entirely of robotic parts. I spotted an artificial eye and ear and shivered involuntarily. "I wish I could say the same, my dear," he said, speaking with the synthesizer. "I'm afraid they found me out." Juno jumped back when she saw his face, and I saw her hand casually reach down towards the stunner that she kept inside her jacket. "You'd be dead if they found you out," she said. "What do you want?" The left side of his face twitched in a spasm. "I want nothing but to die, but that piece has been taken from me." Moving faster than my contactless eye could track, he lifted his arm and fired at us, hitting Juno in the lower leg. Juno fell to the ground with a scream of pain. Dionysus's arm had transformed into some sort of gun. It hissed steam and closed. He aimed it towards her again, but what remained of his face twisted in agony. "I'm sorry," he called out. "I can't control what I'm—" He was hit in the head by Juno's stunner. It knocked him to the floor, where he lay twitching violently. Juno cursed from where she lay on the ground. "Leo!" she called out. I ran up to her. The blast from Dionysus had done some serious damage to her left calf, and blood dripped from the wound, soaking into the factory floor. I knelt down and started to put pressure when Juno smacked me on the head with her stunner. "No, you moron! Take this, go over there, and shoot him 12 times. I set it to kill." She shoved the stunner into my hands and applied pressure to her own leg. I looked down at it in my hand. It was my first time holding a gun. "Now," she hissed. "That hit won't keep him down forever." The old Leo, who ate dinner with his family on Sundays, might have been sick with the situation. The old Leo, who played chess with his father, might have cried or begged for another way. I, on the other hand, said nothing. I don't know. I made my way over to the still twitching body of the man and fired at his head and arm until they were both unrecognizable. After it was done, I walked back to Juno and helped her tie up her leg. She looked over at Dionysus and spat on the ground. "Poor fool," she said. "He fought against it till the end. His type don't just miss and accidentally hit a person's leg." I went to hand her back the stunner, but she pushed it away. "Keep it. My leg is stable, but you need to run back to the hideout and bring people to help carry me there." I nodded, stuffed the gun into my back waistband, and headed back out into the rain. I moved quickly, and after a few minutes, turned a corner that led towards the hideout. I was so preoccupied with getting there that I hadn't noticed the buzzing. 4 Reavers sat in the street in front of the alleyway, hacking at the metal and concrete with their arms. They reached their tentacles down into the bunker and ripped out couriers one by one, shoving them into the holding bays, through doors where a squid's mouth would be. I held my hand over my mouth and ducked back around the corner. Then I heard the sound I'd been dreading, a young girl's shriek of fear. I looked back around the corner and saw Anna lifted by a claw and stuffed into a hold. She was holding the stuffed shark in her arms. A long minute passed as one of the Reavers stuffed its arm inside the hideout, rooting around inside the bunker. It finally retracted, and the 4 Reavers flew off into the night. They'd be heading out of the city. I didn't know where. No one knew where they took the relocated people. I walked up to the hideout, then looked back up to watch their lights disappear into the night sky. I pulled out the stunner to fire at them, but it would have been useless. Almost as if on autopilot, I walked into the broken remains of the hideout. The Reavers had made deep gouges in the steel of the hallways and had torn the doors from their hinges. I walked into what remained of my room and saw the shattered and twisted metal of the desk and bed. The bathroom was relatively untouched, however. My contacts were still on the bathroom counter. I picked them up and walked outside. The rain came down hard, thunderous and loud. I slipped one contact on, then the other, and the night came alive with information and light. My tears mixed with the electrofluid, and I felt a fierce determination rise up in me. I was going to find Anna, and if they had done anything to her, I wasn't going to stop until Henderson was dead and their buildings were rubble. I hope you all enjoyed this story. I realize it's a departure from what I normally upload on this channel, but I figured it'd be best to let you jump right into it without an introduction. Don't worry, I'm definitely going to be making a part 2 to this story, so you can be on the lookout for that in the coming week or two. I'm also planning on making a part 2 to the story The Behemoth by the Barbershop, so if you haven't watched that story yet, please go do so, as you'll be getting a part 2 also in the coming weeks. Another reminder that I write and narrate every story on this channel. If you've enjoyed my stories and have the means and the desire, please support me on Patreon. Your donations mean more than I can possibly say. A huge shout out as always to Melissa Priolo, And to my 2 new Patreon supporters, Lilith Scyther and Maureen Garcia. Thank you so much for supporting me. Your donations help run this channel. If you have enjoyed this style of story, please leave a like and a comment saying so. Otherwise, if you didn't like it, please also leave a comment saying that you prefer horror stories. I'm interested to hear your reaction as to whether or not this is something that I should continue with. I really enjoyed working on this story. Writing something in the cyberpunk genre has been on my to-do list for a long time. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed your time on Worchester Street.